Howdy. I'm John August. I'm Interim Dean of the School of Public Health at Texas A&M University, and it's my real pleasure to welcome all of you to today's symposium on the impact of plastics on the lives of all living creatures and on the environment. As a little bit of background, I'm a veterinarian, so I'm very interested in what's going to be discussed today. Today's symposium is an important part of the School of Public Health's agenda for National Public Health Week, which we have been celebrating for the last several days. Before I introduce the moderator of today's discussion, I'd like to thank all of the panel members and organizers of today's event, specifically Natalie Johnson, Erin Schneider, both from the School of Public Health, Kelly Wellman from Texas A&M University Office of Sustainability, and Megan Brown and Elizabeth Longstaff from Humanscale. I'd like to say a few words now about the moderator of today's presentations and discussions. Christine Figgener, originally from Germany, is one of the few marine biology interdisciplinary program students on the College Station campus, where she is about to finish her dissertation on olive ridley turtle trophic and movement ecology. Before starting her Ph.D. at Texas A&M, Christine worked in marine turtle research and conservation in Central America for over a decade. She considers herself a conservation biologist and an ocean advocate. Her ambition is to apply her research findings to the conservation of endangered species, in particular marine turtles. She is a founding member of the grassroots organization Costa Rican Alliance for Sea Turtle Conservation and Science in Costa Rica, which empowers local conservationists and scientists, in particular local women. Her shining public moment is a viral video she uploaded in 2015 that documented the removal of a plastic straw from an olive ridley turtle's nose. That video provided fuel and a valuable tool for the global anti-straw movement, leading to several straw bans by businesses such as Starbucks, Disney, and Alaska Airlines. It has also given voice in the conversation around the use of single-use plastics and other environmental issues affecting marine life. Christine has made such an impact that she recently was named a Next Generation Leader by Time magazine and was a finalist of the feature Texan of the Year by the Dallas Morning News. So while the upcoming video may be a few years old at this point, Christine's research campaign against single-use plastics for the benefit and conservation of marine life and her empowerment of women in STEM is still young, important, and necessary. So we're going to watch a short video about Christine's contributions.
Difference, and I'm trying to motivate the next generation to make a difference, because even though it's not their fault, they are likely the people that will find the solutions to our problems. It's not a freaking straw. Don't freaking tell me it's a freaking straw. Keep it, please. We're gonna look at that later on. I mean, that is just stupid. Show me, please. I want to. Oh my God. That is just freaking. When we got to the point that we actually knew that it was a straw, for me in the very beginning it was absolute disbelief. And then just shock and anger at us humans that, you know, just one straw that one person probably discarded, not meaning very likely anything bad, and that got stuck in that turtle's nose and might have caused a lot of suffering. And that is just one turtle, one straw that we found. The straws are just the poster child for a much bigger problem, and it's the part of the problem that we can actually do something about in our everyday life. Everybody can do their part in helping turtles or helping this planet to exist for longer.
Please help me welcome Christine Figgener.
Morning, actually. Thank you very much for having me at this event, and thank you very much for organizing this event. I'm very excited that we have this on campus today, and it was such a lovely introduction. So I don't have much to add about my persona. The things that I would like to add, though, is that my video has provided me an incredible tool to start a conversation about plastics. And you now might ask me, why do we even need to talk about plastics, right? So unfortunately, we humans have developed a very unhealthy relationship or dependency on a very, with a very unsustainable material. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but plastic is made from petroleum, which is a fossil fuel. So that's a non-renewable resource, and it will end eventually. And the other problem is that plastics don't just disappear after it has been made. So it is actually the fact that most of the plastic that has ever been produced still exists on our Earth today. And only the small part that might have been burned or might have been recycled is not here anymore. But just to put perspective on that, only about 9% of plastics will get recycled. So that begs the question, of course, with so much plastics that are on Earth, what happens to that? So a big part ends up in landfills and will stay there up until day X. Other parts will be ending up in the ocean, so there might be storms, hurricanes, floods, maybe even intentional dumping into the ocean. So we have a massive problem with ocean plastics. And then we have another part that, for example, countries such as the US or countries in Europe that don't want to deal with their own plastic trash anymore ship to other countries such as China and Malaysia, which do not have a good health management, plastic management in place. So that means this plastic is still around, and we have to ask ourselves, what kind of effect does it have on our planet? What kind of effect does it have on the creatures that live on our planet, and that also includes us? And so today, I'm very happy to discuss all of these points with our incredible panel. So we have Dr. Natalie Johnson, who is an assistant professor of environmental occupational health. Then we have Dr. Pamela Plotkin, who is an associate research professor with the Oceanography department and the director of Texas Sea Grant. And we have John Strasser, who works for Humanscale and is the Vice President of Workplace Strategy and Industry Relations. So maybe to start the panel, where I will also sit down right there, each member can tell a little bit their story of how they came to be connected with plastics.
Thanks, Christine. So my main role in environmental and occupational health is to, train the next generation of students that are going to deal with issues related to sustainability. So I see many of our MPH students here in the audience that are getting their bona fide degree in environmental health to go out and solve these issues. My other role is in research. So I'm a toxicologist by training, and my background really focuses on children's environmental health issues. Mainly I'm interested in how exposures coming from the air, such as air pollutants like particulate matter or benzene exposure, cause many health effects in children that could be acute respiratory disease and asthma early in life, but extend as far as into adulthood. And much research is being done related to how plastics in our environment, microplastics that are leaching from our products into water, into food. So there's a huge oral exposure that could be really detrimental to children's health. So I'm here both as a citizen, interested in how we can reduce our use and our reliance on plastic, and as a researcher to talk about what are some of the health effects from these exposures that may really impact vulnerable and susceptible populations.
So I'm clearly the undereducated member of the panel here today. So I represent the layman. Those of you who don't know anything about Humanscale, we design and manufacture product that goes into a lot of commercial office space. And as a manufacturer, with factories, we began to ask ourselves if we were actually doing enough to save the planet, which sounds like a lofty goal in the midst of profitability and selling product, right? So we kind of worked with a group and decided that we were really concerned with the ingredients of our product. Specifically, were there synthetic toxins in our product that we didn't know about? And so we're a complex manufacturer. We work with hundreds of suppliers that make parts and pieces for our product that we assemble. And we created an initiative a few years ago that we were going to be toxin-free. We were not going to allow product like PVC, formaldehyde, PFCs in our product, which meant we had to go to our suppliers and get recipes and find out what was in it. It took us probably about a little over 2 years. We had to work with 153 different suppliers. We had to uncover 214 recipes just to know what was in that chair that Christine's sitting in, just to know what was in it. And we realized that we'd been shipping that chair all across the globe completely unaware of what was in it. And then when we found out that we had toxins in it, we started to work to eliminate those toxins and find safe alternatives. And in the process of doing that, we met a company based in Ventura, California called Borreo. I don't know if anybody here has heard of Borreo. Started by a group of surfers that loved the ocean and really got sick and tired of surfing through ocean plastic whenever they went out to play in the ocean. And so they started a company called Borreo that basically they found a way to recycle nylon fishing nets into nylon pellets. Humanscale really learned how to take our product apart, not piece by piece, but ingredient by ingredient. And when we found out that they had these nylon pellets, we said, hey, let us experiment with these things a little bit. And so we found out that we could use those nylon pellets from fishing nets as a substitution for the nylon that we were using in our chair. So that chair that Christine's sitting in uses about 2 pounds of discarded fishing nets. What Borreo does is they work with fishing villages in Chile. They buy back damaged fishing nets from fishermen, so they incentivize them not to throw the fishing net away or not to let it drift away from the boat, where it becomes something we call ghost fishing gear, and it continues to catch and kill marine life. Now they buy it back from the fishermen bring it back, the fishermen collect net that isn't even theirs, because they know they can sell it back to Borreo. Borreo recycles it, and we buy it. And our goal at Humanscale is to eliminate the use of plastic in our product and work with more companies like Borreo so that we're putting the right materials in our product, not really just the cheapest materials in our product. So that's what kind of brought us into this conversation.
Howdy.
Howdy. I love this howdy thing. I'm taking that up.
It's powerful. It's powerful. You've got to have Aggies in the crowd, though.
It's got to be that's what's an A&M thing.
Doesn't work.
Right.
Doesn't work
You
well
should've
if
told me that
Aggies aren't in the crowd. Yeah. So my name is Pam Plotkin, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Oceanography here at Texas A&M, and also the director of Texas Sea Grant. And I'm going to tell you about 3 times in my life that plastic came and found me, and the impact it had on me at those different moments in my life. So the first time was in the mid-1980s. I was a graduate student here at Texas A&M University working on my master's degree in the biology department, and I was studying sea turtles on the Texas coast. And at that time, there were hundreds of sea turtles washing up on the Texas coast dead. And people were just burying those turtles in the sand dunes to get them off the beach because nobody wanted to sit on the beach with dead, stinky, bloated sea turtles. So I saw that as an opportunity to get some data and learn a little bit about the turtles' diets. And so I started doing necropsies on those sea turtles. And I was really just interested in the foods they were feeding on and trying to determine where they were feeding, where they were swimming, and where they might be dying. And so I found over a 3.5-year period several hundred turtles feeding on a lot of really great invertebrates that live in the ocean. But I also found that over 50% of them were eating marine debris. And most of that marine debris was plastic. And I remember when I was ready to publish that story in a journal, the editor of the journal asked me to take out the part about the marine debris because that wasn't science. And I was shocked, but I wanted my paper to be published, so I took most of that information out of the journal article and moved on to a Ph.D. program and then a postdoc, and then I was a professor at another university. And I came back to Texas A&M University in 2011 and started up my lab here and had a graduate student working with me, and we had the opportunity to acquire some gut content digestive tract samples from sea turtles in the Pacific Ocean. And we started looking at those samples. We had 72 samples from 3 different species that had been collected near the Hawaiian Islands. We knew these turtles had been captured and killed by fishermen. So again, I went into this research project being very excited to see what these turtles were feeding on. And lo and behold, we found that over 83% of these turtles had eaten plastic. So it wasn't marine debris anymore. Now I was looking at marine plastic. It was all plastic. And we found bottle caps. We found an entire toothbrush in one of the sea turtles' tummy. We found an amazing amount of little pieces of hard plastic as well as plastic bags in those turtles. So I was pretty amazed at that point in time because I hadn't really thought about plastic for several decades. And then in 2015, my then graduate student and current graduate student, Christine Figgener, was working in Costa Rica, and she was catching sea turtles out in the Pacific Ocean. And you've heard a little bit of her story today. She pulled a straw out of a sea turtle's nose. And I can remember I was in the middle of a conference when I got a call from Chris in Costa Rica wanting to tell me about this incident that she had just videoed and wanting to know if it was okay if she uploaded that video. And I remember looking at the video, and I had to stop it about a minute and a half into the video. I couldn't watch that sea turtle in pain. And so the administrator side of my brain was saying, no, you shouldn't put that video on YouTube because we don't have permission from the Aya cook to take a straw out of a sea turtle's nose, and some vice president for research is going to be upset because the animal welfare people are going to be upset about it. And then the other side of my brain was saying, this is the reality of what plastic does to marine wildlife, and everybody needs to know what the real result of that interaction is. And so I said, yeah, Chris, you've got to put that video on YouTube. And it went viral, and I did get a call from the VP for research, and we have been accused of actually planting that straw in the sea turtle's nose by some crazy people. But it was that moment in time that I realized I needed to do more than publish a paper in a journal. And so I gathered all the plastic I had taken out of sea turtles over the years, and I had saved it all. And I made a display, and that's the display you see to the right side or left side of Chris over here. And Chris helped me with these displays. We made 3 different displays, and I started going around to school kids and talking to them about the research I did and the viral video that Chris did, because like Chris, I feel it's really important to impact the next generation and teach them how they can all be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So that's my story, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are all interested as well. Maybe not everybody is as familiar as we are with the scope of the problem of plastics. So maybe we can go and just outline a little bit to our audience of, how big the issue actually is.
Well, I can just comment in terms of the human health. If you were to take a representative sample across the nation, either measure people's blood or urine, 100% will come back positive for some form of plastic. So this is not just an ocean issue, but plastic debris is a human health issue. And a lot of those residues you've heard of, such as maybe bisphenol A, phthalates, which are associated with many emerging health effects, and we're all exposed. So now the question is, what is this exposure doing to us? What is this exposure doing to our children? And I think that's a big part of this issue that needs to be highlighted, the human side.
And I think that, you know, the researchers are doing the work out there. They're bringing the facts to light. The challenge is that, I mean, does anybody here in this room think that factories make the world a better place, right? If you had a factory open up in your neighborhood, would you be excited about it, right? And so factories, you know, companies, the commercial side of things have got to climb on board here and acknowledge what's happening. And I think that I've learned a lot over the last couple of years. We joined, Humanscale is a founding member of a group called The Next Wave. It's a collaborative group of manufacturers that are looking at the ocean plastic crisis and saying, okay, we let about 8 million tons of plastic seep into the ocean annually, right? By 2025, by weight, plastic debris in the ocean will weigh 1/3 of the marine life. And by 2050, they'll weigh the same. That's how fast we're filling the ocean with plastic. And the challenge, as Christine had mentioned, is that it breaks apart so quickly. You know, everybody thinks that when the plastic gets in the ocean, well, that's okay. We'll go to this Great Pacific Garbage Patch and we'll just skim it. You know, the kid from Denmark that built the boat that was going to skim the, you know, everybody knew that wasn't going to work. 97% of the plastic in the ocean is on the bottom. It's on the ocean floor, so you can't get it. So what we're trying to do as a manufacturer is, you know, this plastic that winds up in the ocean is worthless plastic. There are people in countries that live on landfills, and their job, the way they make a livelihood, is to pull recyclable plastic from the garbage and sell it, right? That's how they make a living. Well, if the plastic has no value to manufacturing, these pickers are not going to pull that plastic from the landfill, and it's going to eventually wash into the... So we're trying to find, through this collaborative process, and there's some great companies now that have joined us at Next Wave. IKEA just joined us, Amazon just joined us, Dell and HP. I mean, HP does some amazing things with PET. They work with a group in Haiti. Haiti has a problem because they drink water out of water bottles, and those water bottles are now filling up the island of Haiti. HP buys all the water bottles from Haiti, at least the ones that are dark in color, and recycle those into their toner cartridges, right? So, you know, it's a huge, huge problem, and one of the biggest challenges is that these plastic sachets that are floating all over the ocean and breaking down so quickly, manufacturers, we just can't figure out what we can make out of this stuff, right? Everybody wants PET, right? We're starting to make stuff out of polypropylene, but this other stuff is just doesn't have a value in the recycling world. And hopefully, you know, groups like Next Wave will figure out a way to use that as a valuable manufacturing resource. That's sort of one of the things that we have to do. You're up. Howdy. Oh, I forgot to say howdy.
So when I think about the scope of the plastic problem, it makes me think about the scope of climate change and the global nature of that problem. And so I don't know if any of you saw Al Gore in his movie An Inconvenient Truth, but it was really a watershed moment for me when I watched that, because after that movie I was scared. And I think we need an Al Gore for the plastic movement, because I think when you look at the scope of the plastic problem globally, we have a crisis that is in the making, just like climate change, but people are maybe 20 years behind in their perception and awareness of the problem than we are with climate change at this point in time. And so we need some champions out there to talk about the problem. Because as Chris mentioned, all the plastic that has been produced on this planet is still here. It's just smaller in size than it was when it was first produced. And so if you look at some of the statistics, and some of the statistics are really sobering, and I'm going to quote some data from a paper that was published by Jenna Jambak from University of Georgia, who I hope is going to take on the role of Al Gore in the near future, she has estimated that just in the year 2010, between 4.8 and 12.7 million metric tons of plastic came from land sources into the ocean. And so those land sources are global, and those land sources are being driven by waste management systems that are inadequate. And so that was just 2010 alone, the inputs of plastic from land to sea. And so it's a significant problem. Plastic is coming down all our rivers. It's in our watersheds, it's going into the ocean, and from there it's traveling from the poles to the equator, from the surface waters all the way down into the deepest trenches.
And I have to jump in because, not to be a name dropper. Oh, wait, howdy. Howdy. Taking that back with me. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at University of Georgia with Jan back, and she, believe it or not, took me to a landfill in Athens, right? And I was texting with my family on the family group text thing. I'm like, I'm going to a landfill in Athens tomorrow, and nobody responded at all. I was like, come on, man. But, you know, we toured this landfill, and I was with my friend from Amazon, who's part of Next Wave. And all week at our meeting, he was like, well, I'm not worried about the boxes we use, because they're corrugated, they're cardboard, they're recyclable. We get to that landfill, and we're watching these garbage trucks dump garbage in that landfill, and I can't tell you how many boxes came in there. And he just stood there, and I was watching a broken man. He stood there and watched these boxes coming out of these garbage trucks. And Jenna said, a quarter, 25% of what comes out of that garbage truck is recyclable. You know, we just don't recycle. And as if we weren't depressed enough, we went from the landfill to the MRF Center, the recycling center there in Athens, and watched what happens to our recycling. And we think, you know, it's called aspirational recycling. We think when we put it in that blue box, it's going to be okay, right? We think we've recycled. It's good. Let me tell you, it's so not good, right? At the end of the day, they separate that recycling and they bale it, and it sits in their parking lot. And if it's PET, somebody comes and takes it away. And if it's the metal and tin and aluminum bales, somebody comes and takes it away. And if it's corrugated cardboard, somebody comes and takes it away. And if it's paper, somebody comes and takes it away. But the rest of it is baled and labeled mixed plastic. Nobody takes that away. It sits there for a couple weeks till they run out of room, and then it goes back to the landfill. So, you know, the challenge, sometimes I used to think that the challenge is that plastic is linear, it's not circular. But it's also very much tied into your own process. The reason why it's so complicated in our country is that every community has a different process, has a different system in place. Some communities will take polystyrene, some communities won't. So you don't really know what to put in that blue container, right? But I think Jenna is going to be one of the people that figures it out, right? And nobody gets more excited about a landfill than Jenna does. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it is pretty clear that plastics, I mean, if you just think about what you're wearing right now, it's probably made at least from a mixed material, made from plastic. Something that you have in your bags is probably made from plastic. So we cannot deny that plastic is a miracle product. It has led to a lot of advances in science, technology, but I think it becomes pretty clear that this is not the answer to the problem of plastics. And but we should think about what is the answer. How can we solve plastics if we still need it for certain things, but how much of plastic do we actually need? And that, I think, leads us to our next question. And maybe we can start from the other side this time. How do you think we can solve the problem if recycling is obviously not the answer?
So that's a great question. There are a number of ways and different scales that you can approach this, and I think, for me at least, the most important way to try to solve this problem is to get people to stop wanting plastic, because the consumer and consumer demand is a really great motivator. And so when I go out and I talk to school kids, I talk to them about how their choices can make a significant difference. And I always bring my turtle bag, because kids like to see things. And so in my bag, I tell them about things that they can do in their everyday lives. And so, you know, this is perhaps the most ubiquitous thing that kids and their parents see every day, or nearly every day, in the grocery store. And instead of using those, you can have a reusable bag. And you can reuse this time and time again and keep these in your car and take them to the grocery store. So this is a really simple solution to plastic bags. You can, instead of using bottled water, you can use a refillable cup and refill them at a water fountain. So that's one way we can deal with that issue. Instead of using plastic bags for your lunches, you can use these reusable lunch skin bags or other types of bags that are out there and reusable. Instead of using plastic knives and forks and spoons, you can purchase bamboo ones if you can find them. And as one very clever third grader pointed out to me, you can bring the fork from your house. Something I'd never thought about. So I love that suggestion. Instead of using plastic toothbrushes, which I can't use anymore now that I found one in a sea turtle's stomach, you can buy alternatives at our grocery store, and you can find these at HEB and Kroger. So this one is made out of bamboo, this one is made out of plant-based materials. And then finally, looking at straws. You could just say no to straws. Most of us don't need straws in our drinks, and so you could refuse them. You can carry around your own stainless steel straw should you feel compelled to do so. If you're purchasing straws for your business or facility, you could use paper straws. And here's one that has a little ATM logo on it, and here's one that has a little sea turtle on it. You can find these in grocery stores, you can find them at Walmart, you can find them almost anywhere. So paper straws are a great alternative. And so, you know, these things exist. There are ways that we can all play a role in the solutions, and part of that comes with being a good consumer and not buying plastic and thinking about what you buy, and maybe even asking those companies to change the way they package their products.
I did not know that we could bring props if I had known that. Unfair advantage to the professor, but those are all awesome ideas, and I think that it's definitely a public awareness. It's a public education. I think that you're right, that consumers have got to stop acquiescing and settling for cheap packaging. We really have to think about it. I travel a lot, and it drives me crazy, you know, to go into a hotel room and, you know, I look at that bar of soap, right? And eventually I'll probably get to the point where I probably just need to start traveling with my own soap. But, you know, we use so many of these single-use plastics. We've become so comfortable using them, we barely think about it, right? We really need to hold the big guys, the big companies accountable for driving for some change. I mean, you look at the Procter & Gamble, I don't mean to get myself in trouble by pointing the finger, but these big consumer products companies that are putting stuff in little individual use sachets, that's the problem. We need to really force change. It's probably going to take a while, but I think that in the last few years, our awareness of the plastic problem has grown exponentially. And we probably need to understand that outliers in this conversation are probably going to cost us a little bit more, but we need to belly up, and we need to reward the outliers for bringing new materials to light, even though it's costing everybody more. There'll always be a manufacturer out there who'll do it for less, because they'll always find a cheap ingredient, right, or a cheap material. That's always going to be out there. It really is up to the consumer to drive that conversation to higher ground and find better materials. I think that, you know, you look at just the toxic effects, as you mentioned, on plastic. What happens today? I think about it all the time. You know, you develop an allergy in the midlife. Why would you develop an allergy in midlife? Do you think maybe there's a bioaccumulation of toxins in your system, right? The medical community has a term called your body burden, right? We even have a term for it. We're not horrified anymore that we get exposed to toxins. Nah, that's okay. We're only horrified if you get exposed to too many. So who gets to make that call, right? I think that we need more transparency, right? We need to demand transparency from manufacturing. That's going to go a long way, right? Oh, you have your own.
Well, you guys covered just about everything. And growing up, I remember the 3 R's, you know, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I think what you both hit on is recycling's not solving the problem due to its inherent issues. So when I was looking online before this, I found out there's actually 5 R's now. So in addition to reuse, reduce, and recycle, there's rethink and restrain. So I think having the restraint to choose easy options that still accomplish the purpose is a great way to go, because we're all inevitably exposed. And so we have the power as consumers, as purchasers, to demand higher quality, to have the healthiest lives possible. And so the big issue with BPA in plastic water bottles, it wasn't removed because all of the accumulating toxicology data. It was removed because consumers didn't want to have a bottle with BPA because they had the knowledge that it was unhealthy. So what we have to make sure now is, in addition to consumers demanding higher quality, that they have the knowledge that, okay, it's BPA-free, but now what was put in there? Was it just this replacement chemical? Like now they use BPS or BPF, and what are the health effects of those? So that's where our regulatory agencies come in, such as the FDA and EPA, to really look at that data and see, is this safe for consumers? And then for us as scientists to not only do the research and publish the papers, but use platforms that are available to get the word out that, that this is something that may be harmful to you.
Yeah, playing a little bit the devil's advocate right here. So we have already science that shows that plastics are detrimental not only to wildlife but also to our health. But at least to me, it seems that a lot of entities are still so unwilling to make changes, maybe because of cost issues, because we know it's a little bit more expensive. But we, for example, here at Texas A&M, we are educating thousands of young adults that are living for the first time away from home. So that means there is new habits that can be formed. So I just would like to ask you, what do you think, what kind of role could a university play in forming new habits, of even being more sustainable in their own actions to act as a role model?
I'll take that one. So last year I worked with some Girl Scouts, and Chris helped me work with the Girl Scouts, and they were doing a project, and they were going around town to all the different restaurants, educating them about straws and providing them alternatives to plastic straws. And they got a couple of restaurants to buy in to the straw problem, and those restaurants began using straws as an optional instrument rather than one that came in their drinks. And I remember sitting down with them and asking them if they would be willing to meet with Texas A&M University leaders with me to talk to them about straws, because here at Texas A&M, you think about one football weekend, and you think about all the people buying drinks and all the straws going in those drinks. If we could, just for one football game, put a paper straw in everybody's drink, wouldn't that be really cool? So I thought bringing these Girl Scouts with me to talk to university leadership would be my ticket. And then they disappeared. I don't know where they've gone. So I think they finished their project, and now they've moved on to some other Girl Scout project. So I'm going to take Chris with me, and we're going to take our little paper straws with the A&M logo, and we're going to go meet with some of the athletic leaders at this university, and I'm going to offer to buy all the paper straws for that game, and we'll see if they nibble at that offer. And so we want to start small, but there have been athletic complexes and arenas throughout the world that have started becoming part of the solution, and they have banned straws from their facilities or other plastic single-use plastic products. And so I'd love to see this university be part of the solution and help educate students at the same time about some of the plastic issues that we're seeing. So that's my personal goal, my personal challenge, and I'm going to challenge Texas A&M to help me with that.
Yeah, I think the college campuses probably are far and away ahead of most demographics in the country. You know, the students get it. The students are trying to learn more about it. They're trying to do the right thing. There's low-hanging fruit, right? That's what you're talking about. I mean, I would love to see plastic-free campuses. You know, that's sort of like the next step in this conversation. That's going to build awareness. But I love the idea of, imagine a football game where you just didn't serve anything in plastic, right? People probably wouldn't even notice, right? Nobody would complain, like, oh my God, this is a bamboo spoon I'm eating my nachos with? No way, right? But those are the things you have to do. And you can start with the easy stuff, like getting the plastic silverware out of all the cafeterias, right? And build on that. But the college campuses are probably pushing this conversation further along than anybody else right now, I think.
John, can I ask you, since a lot of our students are going to graduate and go into industry, what's something they can do when they move into those positions to try and have organizational effects on sustainability?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that more and more organizations now are realizing that if they want to recruit and retain the best talent, they have to have a philanthropical, socioeconomic thread to their brand, right? They've got to be, you can't be agnostic in this conversation anymore. As a company that's looking to hire talented people, people don't want to work for companies that don't care anymore. That's the reality. And I think that what you're going to find as you graduate and you have your North Star in this conversation, you're going to find companies that want to embrace that with you. And that's really cool. And I know that traditionally we've struggled in this conversation because somebody starts working for a company and says, I want to be the sustainability person, I want to drive, and they become an island, right? And they become like the sustainability police, and everybody's like, oh, you know, here comes Bethany again to make us recycle our copy paper. Ooh, everybody put it in the blue thing, right? And then, you know, you almost ostracize that poor person that just wanted to do something good, you know? But today, companies are incorporating this in the culture of who they are and what they do. And so I think that as young graduates looking to start a career, you're going to find that, you know, this narrative is, companies are ready to have it, and they're going to embrace it, and it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun for you to get behind it. And you're going to be able to create change. I think that's the really cool thing. Culturally, companies are getting to the point now where they know they've got to make some changes, and they need people like you to get out there and be the catalysts.
Yeah, I think if there is any questions from the audience, we could take some questions. I think there is a microphone ball that will be going around.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. What do you, I mean, because obviously, you know, producing things with the hopes of recycling it in the end is an ideal, which I'll hit on multiple times. I don't know if you've heard of the new venture loop that TerraCycle has created with Procter & Gamble and so on, but it's the old milkman model, you know, where you come by once a week, picking up the old milk bottles, replacing them with new ones to refill them with milk, you know, for somebody else. Do you think that that's a viable approach? Because obviously, investing in more expensive material, but something that's durable and that can actually be reused instead of just discarded, or hopefully a piece of it can be reused down the road is a viable solution, or at least a factor in a long-term solution?
I'm going to repeat the question because we have some listeners that will not hear it otherwise. So she asked about schemes where you have containers that are pretty much put into circulation, which can be reused. So it's kind of the old milkman model, where you have a glass bottle and you put out your empty ones, the milkman picks it up again and cleans it and refills it. And she was asking if this might not be maybe a better choice with the plastic. So I don't know if the panel wants to take that question.
I hate to be pessimistic. It's not in my nature, but I just feel that we've become so accustomed to convenience that that's where the issue may be. I think some things it could work, but you know, for instance, I usually always take my reusable shopping bags to the H-E-B and do my shopping. Well, now they have a new service where they can deliver it to your house. Okay, I'll try that. That's really convenient. Now I save time. Well, they deliver all the groceries to my house in plastic bags. So then there's a new issue that you have to contend with. So I think it's going to be about balancing convenience, which people are going to seek, with sustainable efforts.
So, and I'll tell you a funny story. To answer the question, I think that it almost depends on how you want to look at it. Because the amount of carbon emissions and the footprint created to make these containers, a lot of really environmentalists would argue that that's probably not the perfect solution. Convenience is probably the overriding issue there. Most of the plastic that we consume, we're very much an on-the-go society. And so we consume a lot of our plastic when we're on the road, when we're throwing something away at a gas station or a convenience store, where there's not adequate recycling set up. That's a big problem. We started making things out of plastic in 1950. It's a recent material phenomenon. We were using 5.5 million tons a year. In 2009, multiply that by 20, we were up to 110 million tons a year. So we're over-consuming plastic dramatically. So I have a refillable water bottle, and when I go to Starbucks, I get a coffee in that, right? So this morning I go to Starbucks and I said, could I just get like a grande pike, right? And the guy's like, oh yeah, and he opens it up and goes, well, this is gonna hold, you know, less than a grande. I mean, you should maybe just get a tall. You wanna just get, I said, I don't care, we're arguing over 30 cents, just fill it with some coffee and I'll pay you, right? So he's like, well, let's just make sure. So he takes a Starbucks cup and he fills it with pike, and then he pours it into my oh, you're right, you know, that's a grande, yeah. And I'm like, oh, God. So it's, you know, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, so is there any other questions?
Very interesting microphone thing. I had a question about the use of the conversation about plastic straws as, Christine, you had a great phrase that I can't remember what it was, but basically using the conversation about plastic straws as a gateway to talking about the bigger problem. And I was wondering if you could comment on the one hand, using that to as a proxy for the larger conversation, and then on the other hand, maybe people getting confused and thinking, oh, I'm gonna not use plastic straws, which means I'm good, and missing the larger picture.
Yeah, maybe I'm going to answer that question. So I think you will always run in danger of that people confuse those topics, because I think people look for instant gratification, right? So that means, oh yeah, they stop using straws, which seems easy enough, so they feel good about themselves. But I think even those people come probably from a side that, they've never even thought about the plastic issue before. So I really think just 5 years back, nobody talked about it. And all of a sudden, you know, 5 years later, the UN talks about it. Different countries are banning not just plastic straws, but single-use plastics. And I think even if you're trying to not pay attention, you will probably hear about it in one way or another. And, you know, for me, it's not about people that do everything perfectly, because I know there are the hardcore, you know, earth warriors that are plant-based and plastic-free, zero waste, and this is absolutely admirable. But I think for most people, this is just not feasible, right? And I think it also scares away a lot of people that think, oh, good, I can never live up to those expectations. So I think, in my opinion, I would much rather see that a lot of people, if not all, would try imperfectly maybe to make a difference, you know, and even if you forget every once in a while your shopping bags, or then you have a plastic straw in your drink, I still think that, you know, in the overall picture, you will still reduce, you know, the overall consumption by so much. So, you know, it's the same discussion of like, how much meat should we eat in order to save our planet? So, I mean, yeah, it's not feasible that everybody will become a vegetarian, but just think about it, maybe just eating meat every second day, right? So maybe just have a month every year that you do completely plastic-free, and the rest of the time you're trying your very best, and I think that's probably good enough if everybody is doing it.
Okay. Taking a different track, more of a conservative orientation, you know, I believe you're really focusing on the idea of a single use, but at the end of the day, you have folks out there that are dumping large quantities into the ocean, and focusing on a single use issue seems to be, you know, making somebody feel good today or fix the problem in the future. So I guess my question is, how do you build on this to go after the bigger polluters? The folks that are dumping large quantities into the ocean, you know, the ships that are dumping into the ocean, versus a single-use item having a significant difference.
Yeah, so the question is, sorry, I think I forgot to actually repeat the question the last time. If maybe just concentrating on single-use plastics and not on the big polluters, and the example was given that ships that dump plastic into the ocean, that it might not be the right approach, or if it's the right approach.
So I'm going to take that one. So to answer part of the question, in 1988, the United States passed the Marine Pollution Act, known as MARPOL, and that banned the dumping of plastics and other debris at sea. But that's just a law. That isn't reality. And so my colleague and I actually did a study of the sea turtles that we looked at prior to 1988 and the sea turtles that we looked at from 1988 to 1998 to see if there was a difference in the amount of garbage the turtles were eating. There was not a difference in the percentage of turtles that we found with garbage in them, nor was there a significant difference in the amount of garbage they were eating. So I think there needs to be more done to follow through on some of the laws that we have, not just to protect our ocean, but our inland waterways. And a great example of this is down in Port Lavaca, Texas. There's a Formosa plastic plant there, and they have been dumping little plastic pellets into the environment for years. And those little plastic pellets are more affectionately known as nurdles, so you may have heard of nurdles. Those are those little plastic pellets. And they know they're not supposed to dump these in the environment. It's just a byproduct of their manufacturing. And one woman, I think her name is Diane Wilson, who lives in the area, has been photographing the outfall of the plastic pellets from the Formosa plant. And these pictures are shocking because there's millions coming out every week from this plant. So she and some attorneys took them to court, and the last time they went to court, they were fined $120,000. $120,000. Do you think that makes a difference to a big chemical plant or plastic plant like Formosa? No. So they kept on polluting. So the case is being heard again, and just, you know, to connect it back to wildlife, in the 1980s and in those samples that I have up there, I did find plastic pellets in sea turtles. Did it kill the sea turtles? No. But I don't think sea turtles should be eating plastic pellets. I don't think fish should be eating plastic pellets. I don't think our shellfish should be eating plastic pellets. And that's what we see in the areas where those plastic pellets are being discharged.
I would also like to add, so I think there's a lot of times the misconception that the ocean plastic is from people that dump stuff into the ocean on purpose. And I think Pam has actually mentioned it already. 80% of the plastics in our oceans are from land-based sources. That means they were properly disposed of. So that means they were in a landfill, a big storm or a big flooding happened, and since most rivers end up into the ocean, it doesn't matter how landlocked that landfill might have been, it will end up in the ocean. And also, our plastic gets shipped to China, into Malaysia, for example, and these countries do not have a good waste management system. So that means those plastics might also end up into our oceans. So that means even if we, think we have disposed of it and it was single-use plastic, it's still the same issue. It's not two different issues, it's the same issue. So if we are able to reduce our plastic consumption, that means there will be eventually also less plastics, for example, in our oceans.
And I just add a couple things to that too. 20% of the plastic in the ocean is discarded fishing gear, right? So that's a huge problem right now, and it could be discarded because it was damaged and the fishermen just didn't want to bring it back to port. It could be lost through a storm. A good portion of the plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is actually fishing gear that washed away from Japan during that great tsunami that they had, believe it or not. So that's a big problem. But these plastics, and we really focus on the single use, because the single use, it really, if it has no value, it's more likely to wind up in a landfill. That's because no recycler wants to buy it, right? But the other challenge is, to give you an example of how these toxins cling to these microplastics that are pervasive and they're everywhere, they're ubiquitous. Orca whales in the Pacific Northwest have some of the highest concentration of halogenated flame retardants in their system. It's so high, in fact, that females live longer than males, because the female is able to detoxify herself when she gives birth to the first calf. Consequently, the firstborn calf doesn't live very long, right? But the females live longer than the males because they're able to do this. So that's, one example. These plastics and these toxins wind up in apex predators. That's what ends up happening. And then that's how we eat them. So. And
maybe also to add something, why we concentrate on single-use plastics is that in average, one plastic bag that you will take home from your grocery shopping is used 15 seconds. And then it's discarded. So we've talked about it in the beginning that plastic is a miracle product, but we're trying to pretty much find the plastics that are not absolutely necessary. And so single-use plastics are really the plastics that are not necessary. They might be convenient a lot of times, but they're not absolutely necessary to survive. Unlike maybe, for example, if you need an injection at the hospital and the syringe is made from plastics, right? So I would advocate for, yes, I would accept plastic in those circumstances. But yeah, so this is the reason that single-use plastic is definitely a topic to concentrate on. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so we're unfortunately out of time. I would have loved to discuss some more. But thank you very much for attending today. I hope that you have realized that all of you can make a difference every day of your life. So you can vote with your dollars, because in the end, nobody will produce anything that nobody will buy. And I hope with this message, you might just go home and make little changes, bigger changes. And I thank you very much for your attendance, and also our amazing panel.